Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us here today for the Environment Education webinar hosted by Ward 4 Councillor David West. My name is Andrew Caldana. I'm an event coordinator for the City of Richmond Hill, and I've had the pleasure of working with Councillor West and his staff to help plan and facilitate the webinar this afternoon. Now, before I turn it over to Councillor West to get us started, I just wanted to bring your attention to the screen here just to run through the schedule for the webinar this afternoon and just to go over a couple housekeeping items. As you guys can see, we're pleased to be joined by four presenters here this afternoon to discuss three topics as it pertains to the environment. I won't go into detail about the speakers or the topics at this point, as Councillor Russ will do so just in a couple of minutes. But I do want to mention, as you guys can see here, if you guys haven't already done so, please visit Councillor West's website. It's davidwest-richmondhill.ca/events. We do have a partner resource center that's listed on the website. Of course, we can't meet in person here today. And as Councillor West typically does, he supports several groups that are environment themed, and he likes to promote them at his events, whether it's EcoFest in the past or the Maple Syrup event. This is a new way just to promote these organizations on his website. So please do visit the web and click on those community or these organization links just to see what they have to offer. In addition, we do have a quiz that's environment themed listed on the website through a platform called Kahoot. If you haven't heard of Kahoot, it's just a way to engage some participants and have some fun with an environment themed quiz. I believe there's about 15 questions. So it's at the bottom of the web page. If you visit after the event, scroll down to the bottom, click on the link and have some fun with our Kahoot quiz. A couple housekeeping items I do want to note. This webinar is being recorded, something just to keep in mind. As it pertains to question and answers, we will be facilitating Q&As at the end of each presentation. So that will be facilitated through Councillor West. I just ask if you guys can submit. There's an icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Submit your questions through the Q&A feature, and Councillor West will be pleased to answer those questions with the respective speaker when the time comes. And finally, I do want to note what works well for me when I'm attending webinars. Just have the email open handy that includes the webinar link and or a call-in number should you get disconnected at any point in time during the webinar. Just having that email handy is a good way to just to click on the link or call in the number right away so you can join us back immediately after you do get, if you do get disconnected at any time throughout the webinar. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will pass it over to Councillor West to get us started. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome, everybody, to the first Richmond Hill EnviroFest webinar. As many of you may already know, this event actually represents the second annual Richmond Hill EnviroFest. Last year, about this time, I hosted the inaugural EnviroFest at the Mill Pond Park, and it was a great success. At that event, many people came out to learn about the environment and connect with others interested in this topic. Ultimately, the event helped to strengthen the connections and education for all of us so that we can collectively achieve a better environment in Richmond Hill. The pandemic has not allowed us to gather in person again this year, but I remain committed to this initiative and keeping it alive because I really believe that the environment is one of, if not the most important issue that communities like Richmond Hill face. I hope you enjoy the presentation today. The purpose of this event will be to provide information to residents about the foundational importance of a healthy environment to our lives and the life of a strong community of Richmond Hill by giving practical ideas on how people can participate in a positive way to make things better. The natural environment is entirely foundational to all of everything that we do. The consequences for treating the environment badly are real and they're serious. It seems to me that even in my lifetime, we have seen an increasing number of examples where our past environmental actions have come back to haunt us. Two examples in the news that point to the consequences of poor environmental choices that were not made with environmental sustainability in mind would be increased wildfires that we've seen in Canada and abroad, and in the increase in frequency and strength of extreme weather and the resulting flooding. However, on a more positive note, we always have the potential as a community of Richmond Hill to serve the environment well and reap the benefits of good decisions that we have the opportunity to make each and every day. In my role as a councillor, I think Richmond Hill Council has made some good decisions in the past. I am proud that while I've been on council, we passed Greening the Hill, our environmental strategy. We're almost finished our community energy and emissions plan. And I'm also particularly proud that council adopted a number of motions that I've introduced that work towards a better environment, such as the Mayor's Monarch Pledge and the Bee City Pledge, which work specifically toward creating a healthier local environment for bees and pollinating insects. Most recently, a climate change motion that I introduced was passed by council and will help guide Richmond Hill's decisions to collectively reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. I'm also pleased that council has passed a motion to have staff investigate how we can reduce our use of single-use plastics. And I would add that it seems fairly clear recently that the federal government is also taking a lead on this subject, which is great. These are just a few of the initiatives, and later in the presentation today, our environmental services staff will give some further details about these environmental initiatives. It was recently published in the Greenbelt Foundation report that the Greenbelt alone provides $3.2 billion in services to Ontario communities through flood protection, water purification, and stormwater management. Stop to think about that for a minute. $3.2 billion is a very big number, and it would be hard to imagine us humans being able to engineer, let alone pay for these services if they were not already being given to us for free by Mother Nature. This is an example of the practical and obvious reasons for Richmond Hill and other communities to make decisions that represent good environmental choices. While the monetary practical arguments for protecting the environment are important and compelling, they're not necessarily the ones that I think of first. I've been fortunate in my life to develop a love of nature early in life and develop this love and learning about the environment and issues concerning the environment through university and also later in my life. It was through these collected experiences that I've also come to realize just how wonderfully complex and beautiful, let alone very important, the natural world and protecting the environment continues to be for us. It's just as important that we care for our environment for our future generations as well. As the impacts of climate change and pollution have come home to roost in recent decades, people are also coming to a firm realization that our environment is important, but additionally, more and more people are feeling the need to take positive action. I suspect that describes most of you that have turned into this webinar today, and I thank you very much for being here. I hope that you'll come away from this webinar with actions that we can all take to make better environmental decisions. Richmond Hill, as you know, is a growing community, and that's a good thing. However, accommodating growth is a complex challenge, and the choices we need to make as we grow will have positive and/or negative implications. These implications will reach all of us and will also reach over many generations. I had the pleasure the other day of attending a seminar with First Nations elder Dr. Duke Redbird from the Saugeen First Nation and former Toronto Mayor David Crombie. The discussion was about the history of the Toronto waterfront, but from a First Nations perspective. Dr. Redbird said many inspiring things during this presentation, but the one that resonated with me the most was how, in his view, Lake Ontario waterfront should not be viewed just as the strip of land around Lake Ontario. In his view, the waterfront includes all that land, but it also includes the land that extends north along the many rivers and creeks and valleys all the way from Lake Ontario to the Oak Ridges Moraine. And much of that land, of course, sits right here in Richmond Hill. I agree with Dr. Redbird, and we need to think of the waterfront in this way. It's a subtle perspective difference, but I think it's important. When you consider the waterfront in this broader context, it becomes much more obvious how connected we are and much broader view of the environment. If you think that way, it becomes very obvious that what we do in Richmond Hill, we also do to Lake Ontario. In a very real way, the hydrogeologic ecosystem is connected and integrated over a very wide area, and municipal boundaries are frankly very irrelevant. And this is a really important concept. We have a responsibility in Richmond Hill to care for this resource because we're lucky enough to have the headwaters of the Rouge, the Humber, and the Don River all within our community. I would add that this pandemic moment in our history, it's never been more important to note that we're also connected to each other and to the environment with many different threads that bind us. It's crucial that we act together in the best interests of the environment and also of each other, I also think that it's an important opportunity after this pandemic that we build back better. And it would be a horrible shame not to grasp this opportunity. We are right now at a time where we're all looking at the world and assessing what is working and what we could and should be doing better. Many people are also assessing what is foundational in their lives, and it seems clear from a recent survey done by Richmond Hill that many residents have come to the conclusion that a healthy environment is important, and it continues to be a priority for our collective community. I was not at all surprised by this finding, but I think it presents a great opportunity to continue to work towards positive change. As a politician, I know that we will grow as a community, and this can be a positive thing. Being environmentally sustainable while we're doing this is not necessarily achieved by building nothing. It's about building infrastructure and improving developments that are the right size and are being built within the sustainable envelope that Mother Nature has given us. On that note, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land that we are on in Richmond Hill. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, whose presence here continues to this day. We would also like to acknowledge that the land we are on is at the meeting place of two treaties, the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and those of the First Nations of the Williams Treaty. We would like to thank them and other Indigenous people for sharing this land with us. We acknowledge this land and the people because the first step to reconciliation is recognizing the existence of Indigenous people. A shared understanding of how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk into a better future. So, before I introduce the first speaker, I did want to take this opportunity to say thank you to our sponsors, Healthy Planet and Miller Waste and Miller Compost. Each of these businesses have the environment as a cornerstone of their business, and I'm very pleased that since the very first EnviroFest that I hosted last year, they have so quickly offered to support that event and this event. You will hear more from Miller Waste in a moment, but I would like to introduce you to Healthy Planet if you don't already know about them. Healthy Planet is a retail store offering over 16,000 products that promote health, and they also have the staff expertise to go with those products. Many of these products are GMO-free and organic, and I know this because in the West household, we are clients of Healthy Planet at their Richmond Hill store, located in the Richmond Heights Shopping Center on Yonge Street in beautiful Ward 4, I might add. So I'm honored to have both Miller Waste and Miller Compost, as well as Healthy Planet, sponsoring this event this year again, so that we can make this happen for all of our attendees. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce John Dursey, and he's going to be giving us a talk entitled Supporting Sustainable Community Living. John works for Miller Compost, which currently owns and operates 4 compost sites nationwide, consisting of both outdoor windrow and in-vessel technologies. And I suspect that you will learn more about just what that means later in John's presentation. Collectively, Miller Compost annually processes approximately 150,000 tons of leaf and yard waste material and source-separated organics, which is the things we put in our green bin. And I would add that some of this material comes right from here in Richmond Hill, from our homes and our yards. Miller continuously increases efforts to divert the organic fraction of solid waste from landfills across Canada, and this is clearly important for all of us. Over the last 2 decades, Miller has been an industry innovator by continually challenging themselves to produce better products that meet the needs of their customers. So John, it's over to you, and I would ask that at this time, if you can share your screen and begin your presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, David. Are we good? Thank you for having me. My name's John. I work for Miller Compost. It's a division of Miller Waste. Miller Waste has currently been operating in the York region area for approximately 59 years, almost 60 years now, and we're supporting the region with their curbside leaf and yard waste pickup, as well as source separated organics, and we deal with some recycling and waste. Miller Compost is a division of Miller Waste, and our main goal is to divert organics from landfill. And in doing so, we have a location on Bloomington where we accept our leaf and yard waste and we process it into a valuable compost that is garden ready and full of nutrients. So the first part of the presentation is going to be going over our processing, and then I'll gear into what compost is mainly used for in the environment and the importance. So Miller Waste picks up curbside waste, your brown bag material from your curbside waste collection. It's brought to a Bloomington Road location, which is located at Bloomington and Leslie, and we process it into leaf and yard waste compost. So what we do first is we have the incoming material ground into smaller particle sizing. And the reason we want to grind it into smaller particle sizing is it creates a smaller surface for the organisms to start breaking down the materials. Once the materials have been broken down, we put them into windrows, which is roughly long rows that you can see on the screen here, and it's easier for us to manage. Each row is roughly about 5,000 to 7,000 yards worth of material. And in these rows, we manage the temperatures between 55 degrees Celsius as well as just under 55. And the reason for these two temperatures is because it gives organisms different phases to take over. The first one is the thermophilic phase, and this is above 55 degrees. This is held for numerous days, roughly 7 to 14 days. The second phase is the mesophilic process. This is where the material starts to cure, and it's where the organisms start to really break down and everything's starting to mature. Through these temperatures, we also want to ensure that there's pathogen kill, weed seed kill, and fecal matter kill. So these temperatures, as high as they are, ensures that all of that is taking place.
Hi, John. It's Andrew. I'm just jumping in here. Were you sharing your PowerPoint presentation? We just don't see it at this point.
Oh gosh.
It's okay. I didn't want to cut you off in the middle. I figured I'd let you finish your speech there. I'll just keep you posted when it's shared.
Here we go.
Beautiful.
Now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to back up briefly. Can you see it?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so the leaf and yard waste is collected and brought to our facility, and then it's ground into smaller particle sizes, and then it's put out into windrows for curing. So these were the two processes or phases of temperatures that I just discussed. And then we begin to manage the rows. So in terms of managing the rows, our main management here is turning the windrows as well as watering, and this is taking place over an 8 to 10 week process. The reason we turn the rows is because we want to get air through the compost, and it starts to blend the compost and gives organisms new platforms to start eating and developing. And then the water also is a key component of composting. So after the windrow process, which is roughly 8 to 10 weeks, we begin our screening process. And what we do is we screen to 2 different particle sizes at our Richmond Hill facility. So we screen to a 1/2 inch and we screen to a 1/4 inch. Both pieces of equipment on the bottom of the screen here, and the pictures do both of those. We're able to set different screen sizes in our process based on volumes we require moving into certain times of the season. Once we start screening the material, it's put up a stacker, and then we stack the compost. And during this process, we have to ensure that the compost is being tested to all ministry and parks requirements. So for each batch, it's consistently tested, and each month, no matter the volume of material on site, it is always tested. So we test fairly periodically to ensure that we're meeting all ministry regulations. Once that stacking is taken care of, we stockpile our compost. And normally over the winter months is when the material is being stockpiled, because we're normally not gardening or doing any soil blending or grass growing over the winter months. So this photo is leading right into the beginning of April, mid-April, when we're fully stocked and geared up for the spring, summer, and fall seasons. Our compost is mainly geared towards landscapers, homeowners, the agricultural market. They use a lot of compost for cash crop, and then the soil blending market. A fair bit also goes into terrace seeding and greening of infrastructure projects. So our customers are mainly soil blenders, municipalities, commercial landscapers, as well as the retail homeowner who is looking to spruce up their gardens, top dress their grasses, and get into small to large landscape projects. We offer a wide selection of bagged products as well as our composted products. We have composted blended soil products, top dressing products, and a wide range of mulches. We also deliver our materials. We have a few trucks local, and then we ship all over Southern Ontario. We can accommodate anything from 1 to 130 yards, depending on our customers' requirements. We manufacture a wider range of mulches. So at the Richmond Hill facility, we also accept clean wood waste. So skids, pallets, 2x4s, clean construction lumber. And we have grinders that grind down that material, and they have magnets that pull out nails, brackets, screws, and any other metals that are present. With that recycled mulch, we convert it into what we call a wood chip. And we have 3 colors for our wood chip. We have a red, black, and a brown. In regards to our natural line, we call this our sawmill series. And with our sawmill series, it's mainly natural wood debris. So tops of tree cuttings, limbs, branches, chips, and all of that is actually a shredded material. Our sawmill series, we also manufacture a red, black, and brown line, and we also carry a utility mulch. We also carry shredded pine and natural cedar. And with the shredded pine and natural cedar, we actually work with a fair amount of lumber mills in the Ottawa Valley that use the end cuts as their waste. So we accept their waste at our facility and we haul it in and we grind it and we make a renewable mulch out of it for landscape projects. The mulches that we are supplied, they're supplied to retail, commercial, and landscapes all over Ontario as well. We deliver as well as bulk pickups. We do the little 2x2 bags as well. We have a fair amount of equipment on our facility. In terms of loaders, I believe we have 7 loaders, a couple excavators, and then we have our turners and our stackers, and then we have our bobcats. We also have a bagging unit, so we do have a fair amount of cost put into the manufacturing of leaf and yard waste. So I wanted to touch on this photo. This here shows the importance of compost. So we're taking a waste out of the stream here, and we're manufacturing a viable product that we are able to put back into the environment. As you can see from the photos, this was actually a job site in Richmond Hill. It was a new development that was done approximately 4 years ago. And at this facility, at this location, all of our compost was actually used for greening of the area. I was lucky enough to have our mulches spec'd into the work. and it was used for the entire project. So it really shows how we can capture groundwater, we can manage erosion control with compost, and it shows what the benefit of compost is in terms of greening our environment. Some more benefits of compost is it's a full circle system. It's organic matter filled with nutrients. It's a great way for waste diversion. A lot of compost is used in low impact developments. It's strong for soil health and fertility. On the picture on the bottom left here, you can see it's used for erosion control. And this is a project here in, I believe it's Markham. It was a school in Markham that they did the whole play area. They had blown in our compost and injected it with seed in a terrace seeding unit. And they're going to be, well, it's growing grass right now and it's greening up. So that'll be the school's field. Some more benefits of compost is growing vegetables and greening of grass and keeping a healthy community. We know it's important to eat local and eat fresh, especially over the last year with COVID hitting. We want to encourage ourselves to grow more vegetables and become more sustainable as a community. So these are all great benefits of compost. It's strong water retention, beneficial for microbes, soil and plant health, and it's slow release nutrients. We're a firm believer in supporting our local communities, and we do give back. Miller Compost is a strong believer in encouraging and supporting donating local initiatives. We support many community gardens, home and garden shows within Richmond Hill. We support the Richmond Hill Blooms event that's held every year. And we are supporters of the York Region Food Network. In terms of the York Region Food Network, we donate compost every year to the actually might be 4 gardens now, the allotment gardens. And it's great to see how that's flourished and how they've been able to grow many fruits and vegetables that they can give back to the community. That's all that I have. I want to thank everyone for having me here today, and I do encourage everyone to please visit us at millercompost.ca and follow us on Twitter, as well as Instagram and Facebook.
Thanks very much, John. That's excellent. And you know, it's amazing we can actually get excited over compost. We do have a couple of questions, actually. So thank you for those that have sent them in. The first one is from Sally. It's a good question. What does forest mulch contain? And she goes on to say that she's ordered that in the past from Miller. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think I have too. So good question, Sally.
Yeah, so our forest mulch is what we consider our utility mulch. It's a natural mulch. So it's a blend of softwood and hardwood tree. And it's actually the body wood of the material and some bark. So what we do is we run it through grinders and we grind it to a 2" minus, which is a shredded material. So it is 100% natural. The natural versus the wood chip product, I'm a firm believer in the natural product. It breaks down, it's very high in organic matter, it supplies water retention, and it creates some weed suppression. So it is 100% a natural product.
That's great. So we have another question here from Marge. Actually, I've thought of this myself too. What makes the compost red and what makes the compost black?
So I've never really seen red compost, but I have seen really, really light compost. So if you're referring to light compost, that's when it would be the early stages of composting. And then as it goes through the composting process over 10 weeks, it becomes very mature and rich and dark. Compost normally is very, very dark. So it's just a different phase within the process.
Interesting, thank you. Actually, we have a question here from Regional Councillor Carmine Pirelli. How do you address the emerald ash borer in your mulch production?
Yes, so emerald ash borer, we do deal with the food inspection agency. Back in the day, they would have us grind off-site in certain locations, and then the material was inspected prior to us shipping it off of our site in Bloomington. Right now, in terms of any disease or ash borer, we found that it is actually being killed off in the beginning of our process through the 55 degrees plus Celsius temperature that is held at for the 4 weeks, and then second part into the 8 weeks.
Thanks, John. It just occurred to me, I think that the previous question about the compost color, I think what was meant to be asked there, I suspect, was actually the wood chip color. Because I know like you can get the wood chip in dark, and my apologies.
That's okay.
Red or dark, whatever that is.
So in terms of coloring our mulches, we use a food grade dye, so it's not harmful to the environment, yourself, pets. So it is a food grade dye, and yes, it comes in red, black, or brown.
Okay, that's great. I think probably we have time for one more. I guess one of the things that strikes me as important, from a user point of view, from the citizens of Richmond Hill, I mean, the uses of your product are awesome, and I've learned a lot about that today. But what advice could you give us in Richmond Hill about the ability for us as citizens to provide a product that's as pure as possible? Because I presume that if we are, it's like recycling. If we're putting things in the recycling bin that are not recyclable, it does cause a problem later, because it may be that the recycling can't be used as readily. So I presume that the same thing applies when we're putting things in our yard waste bins and also in our green bins. So I wonder if maybe you could talk about that a bit.
Absolutely. So the most important discussion that I've had in the past is plastics. By no means is our process 100% plastic free. We've actually diverted 94% of plastics or contaminations in our material we've been able to screen out. The most important thing when putting your brown bags out to curb for pickup is to ensure that you are keeping it as clean as possible by not contaminating it with plastic bags, cans, paper cups that don't break down, that sort of thing. So our constant battle is plastic contamination, and we cannot stress enough the importance of how important it is to clean, just keep a clean process when raking leaves or cleaning out your gardens. Just keep it on the top of your mind that it's not a process that welcomes plastics. We understand that we're never going to be 100% plastic free. Hopefully in a few years down the road with the ban coming along, it will get to that. But it always is our main concern.
Okay, thank you. I find that interesting, because I know when you're raking leaves and so on, I mean, if there's visible things that you're raking up in that material, you want to make very sure that that gets separated from the actual organic material. So the same principles apply, I would assume, for the green bin organics. I mean, you want to make sure that you're keeping things out of the that waste stream that don't biodegrade.
Absolutely.
Are there any other examples from a green bin perspective? What about things like paper? I mean, you said paper cups, and I do know that paper cups are lined often with plastic, so that, I guess, becomes the problem.
That's right.
Can you speak a bit more about the green bin specifically?
So in terms of green bin, each municipality actually has different standards for their green bin processing. Toronto being very, very different than York Region with what they accept in their green bin process. In terms of York Region, again, it's keeping the plastics and and materials that don't break down. So plastics, we don't want to put in green bins. What we do see a lot in green bins is the liners. A lot of residents are using the grocery bags, for instance. We don't want that. There's specific bags for specific purposes in the green bin process. We do catch a lot of the little yogurt containers, the 100-gram yogurt containers. In the process, we want to sort of stray away from that. But getting into food waste in your disposed of oils, that's all good for green bin, bones and such, as well as like little bits of paper and napkins. That's fine for green bin processing as well. All of that breaks down very, very quickly.
Well, that's great, John. Thank you very, very much. We really certainly appreciate all the information that you have given us. And it's nice to know that, you know, as much as possible when we make things go away from our house or our yards, they do end up as a usable product. And that's good for many reasons, but it's certainly good for the environment. So thank you very much for your participation today. And we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
So the next speaker is, whoops, I'm sorry here. My mistake, I'm in the wrong place. The next speaker is two speakers actually, Krista Lynn and Miles O'Brien, who work for the City of Richmond Hill, of course. And their talk will be called Greening the Hill, City-Led Environmental Programs. So I'd like to introduce both of them at this time, and then they can kind of take it from there. Miles O'Brien has worked as the Richmond Hills Environment Education and Engagement Coordinator for the past 6 years. And I suspect that some of you on this call may have talked to Miles in his role as the outreach coordinator. His role involves sharing information and updates from the city's environmental strategy with the community through print and digital media, event displays and interactive games, classroom visits, and more. As a part of the sustainability section in the city, Miles also coordinates public-facing components of Resilient Richmond Hill and the city's climate change initiative. Krista Lynn has been working for the city for 4 years on various environmental programming, ranging from water resources to natural resource management. Her current role as the Natural Environment Analyst includes coordinating programs like the Community Garden Program, the Healthy Yards Program, and more recently, pollinator initiatives. So Miles, I think you're first. It's over to you. If you would like to share your screen at this time so we can see your PowerPoint presentation, that would be great.
Okay, give me 1 second here. All right, so that should be up on everyone's screen now.
Correct, Miles, we're good.
My presentation. Okay, good. Just making sure. So thanks very much for having us. Thanks for that introduction. And I think some of the points that were already raised in the first introduction were great to hear because we'll be touching on some of those as well. So as mentioned, my name is Miles O'Brien. I'll be talking about, for the first half of the presentation, about some of the environmental programs that the city leads. And the point I want to make right off the bat is that for a lot of these programs, a lot of these initiatives, they really do, I'm not just saying this because there's lots of residents on the call, they really do depend on the community to participate and to get involved. And I think you'll hear that through Krista's presentation as well, some of the more kind of detailed programs that she's talking about. So thanks everyone for your involvement and for being involved today. Okay, so I'll be, as I said, I'll be talking a bit more broadly about environmental programs in Richmond Hill. I'll kind of go over the context briefly of what we have here, what we're trying to even take care of when we talk about environment. What are some of the challenges and opportunities in there? And what can the municipality do? And what does the municipality try to do? And then what do we even do for ourselves? How do we walk the talk? So I'll touch briefly on that and then talk about some of the community engagement and involvement programs that I'm involved in, that some of you are, I think, and that should segue nicely into Krista's talk. So first, just a brief quiz, just for fun. And we don't have to submit answers or anything because I'm sure all of you will get 100% on this, but I just thought for fun, let's see. what are the 3 most common trees in Richmond Hill? This is according to the 2017 York Region Forestry Report. I was a little surprised to see this. Number 1 come out was buckthorn at 19%, followed by cedar, and then ash, which I'm guessing has probably declined a bit from the emerald ash borer. But anyway, those are the top 3 in Richmond Hill as per that report. And again, I'll just give a little plug for Krista's talk. You'll see in her presentation how Richmond Hill has really done a great job in terms of tree planting initiatives with the community to increase the diversity of trees in our urban canopy. Okay, number 2, what are the 3 watersheds or river systems with headwaters in Richmond Hill? Let you think about that for a second. You may know these as the Humber and the Don and the Rouge. Well done, everybody, well done. And number 3, what is the name of the multi-use path that runs through Richmond Hill and will connect Lake Ontario and Lake Simcoe? So it's a York Region and City of Toronto initiative. And that is the Lake to Lake cycling route and walking trail. So you might have already seen portions of that going up Leslie, and I think going around Lake Wilcox in certain portions. So there we go, a fun little quiz. Let's get into the presentation now. And I apologize if I go pretty quickly, but I only have half the time. And there's lots to cover here. So let's get into it. So what do we have in Richmond Hill? So obviously one of the major features we're aware of is the Oak Ridges Moraine, as was mentioned in the beginning. So natural forests, rivers, wetlands, valley lands. As well, within that, there's significant wetlands. So the province has designated these as significant that need protection or extra protection. We also have Kettle Lakes, a kind of a unique feature of Richmond Hill, Lake Wilcox being a good example. The 3 river systems I mentioned, the Don, the Rouge, the Humber. We have more than 120 flora and fauna species and about a 29% tree canopy cover. So it's close to 3 million trees. And that is significant in that that number has actually gone up from what it was 5 or 6 years ago. And again, that's really thanks to a lot of the initiatives that Krista's group has done around tree planting. And you'll hear more about that later. So what are some of the challenges? What are some of the opportunities? So speaking of tree planting, you can see in this photo here from 1954, not a lot of trees. So there's the impact that we see on the environment from humans, right? Just from the way that we settle the land, inhabit the land. But we know that this has evolved. So 30 years later, we see more suburban development, and 30 years after that, we see even more. So certainly that has its environmental impacts, but at the same time, you know, there has been a good balance in Richmond Hill with, as mentioned, the Oak Ridges Moraine land, and what Richmond Hill as a municipality is trying to develop, which is a greenway system, which really aims to connect the natural and the built green spaces through the city. So going back to challenges, so we know again that growth and development puts pressure on the environment in whatever way that happens. One kind of impact from that is that it increases the demand for services and infrastructure. So more roads are needed, more water and sewer infrastructure, trails, parks, all these things have some kind of an impact. Richmond Hill now being part of the GTA kind of, I think, adds another layer of impact to that. So for example, all the commuting traffic, and not singling that out, but that is kind of a fact of life for a lot of the GTA. So that additional vehicular traffic adds more air pollution from the emissions, and even water pollution from the road salt that's used in the winter, right? So there's a challenge. How do we deal with that? And then of course, climate change being another layer now that we know it is impacting us and will continue to impact us. And that would be in the form of, in Richmond Hill, increased risk of flooding, ice storms, and heat waves. Okay, so opportunities, right? How can we harness some of these as a municipality? Well, we can look at compact, transit-oriented, mixed-use development. And one of the things that type of development offers is an economy of scale type effect. So we can be actually more efficient in terms of waste management, more efficient in terms of water and wastewater management or services. And we even see that as being part of the GTA. So I said that was a challenge. It's also an opportunity. Being part of a large metropolis actually gives us certain advantages when it comes to environmental services like that. We all know about kind of recent, these amazing technology and innovation type advancements. And those are certainly being integrated, and they will be more and more to help us. So for example, low impact development or LID landscaping. I think the previous presenter mentioned that. LED streetlights, electric vehicles, renewables, and low carbon energy, all things that are emerging more and more and kind of becoming more and more mainstream. That can certainly help. As well, lifestyle changes. So every individual in the city has these opportunities to make choices around things like plastics, walking and cycling, or local food. Okay, so what can the municipality do? You may have seen this. This is our environment strategy called Greening the Hill. It's kind of our brand for the strategy. So the strategy really tries to identify those challenges and those opportunities. It tries to also identify what a municipality, what Richmond Hill can do, and what is outside of its scope, right? There's certain things we don't either have the authority or the capacity to do. So the strategy looks at the three kind of broad environmental areas: air, land, water, and then again, identifies these categories of where we can actually take action. So around transportation, around energy, wildlife, we can do certain things to manage the wildlife in Richmond Hill, sustainable development, local food, waste, trees, and then in water, our watershed. A lot of this is very integrated with groups like the TRCA, with the region, et cetera. And then stormwater and conservation. We're transitioning into an updated strategy. So over the next couple of years, we'll be updating the strategy. We're going to be sort of refocusing those categories into three categories like this: greening our growth, greening our consumption, and greening our natural spaces. And you can get kind of a preview of that in early 2021 or sometime in 2021 when our environmental scorecard will come out, and we'll sort of talk about the progress on the strategy to date. So we also know that within the environment strategy, a lot of these actions can be beneficial in terms of addressing climate change, but that may not be enough on its own. We know it's an important issue that needs its own attention. So fortunately in Richmond Hill, we've been able to develop a brand, Resilient Richmond Hill, and some initiatives to really start tackling this head on. So the main plan that we have underway, and this has been under development for a couple of years, and I think Councillor West mentioned it, the Community Energy and Emissions Plan, and that will focus on reducing energy use and GHG emissions in the community. And some of the actions that could arise from such a plan would be district energy systems, enhanced green standards for new buildings, support for home retrofits and renovations, and expanded cycling and electric vehicle infrastructure. The plan is not completely done yet, so I'm not going to say these are guaranteed actions, but some of the things that typically arise. And this will be coming to the public in 2021 as well. Okay, so what does that actually look like on the ground? I know, we talk about plans a lot, strategies. Okay, what do we actually do? So I'm trying to get a little closer to what happens on the ground here. Again, Krista's presentation will really get to some good details, but some of the examples we would have would be, restoration and monitoring programs in some of our natural areas, urban forest management, So community stewardship, right? Bringing the community out into these natural areas, tree planting, tree preservation, tree protection, stormwater management, stormwater modeling. So there's some of our natural area stewardship. We also have a sustainability metrics program. That's a program to encourage developers to attain kind of a minimum standard of sustainable features in their developments. We have parks and trails plans, we have pedestrian and cycling plans and infrastructure, so things like bike paths, bike lanes. I mentioned in the beginning, talking about a challenge with transportation when we use road salt on our roadways to keep them safe, obviously, in the winter. So we have a salt management plan to at least try to optimize how much salt we're putting on, so we're not needlessly putting on too much. And as well then, as mentioned, our community energy and emissions plan to deal with the challenge of climate change. Okay, in-house, what do we do? What are some examples of walking the talk? Well, we also have a corporate energy plan to look for efficiencies and conservation opportunities in our own facilities. We have an ISO 14001 environmental management system. And that's something that really forces us to look at our own processes, look for opportunities for improvement. We have a third-party auditor coming in to kind of help us to really focus that energy. It requires, upper management buy-in. So really a great system to spread the awareness through the organization. We have cleanup events. So there's a photo there from one of our cleanup events in the past. We have facility waste audits, staff education campaigns, and what's emerging, I think quite soon in the next few months, will be our climate change framework, which is really a way to apply a climate lens to a bunch of our decisions in Richmond Hill. Okay, and finally, community engagement and involvement. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we really do rely on and appreciate community involvement. It's really critical to so many of these programs. So I'll just run through a few points on this. As important as residents coming out, our partnerships are also really important. So we work with the TRCA on a number of programs there. LEAF, Ontario Streams, and Evergreen help with our stewardship activities. Smart Commute for cycling and carpooling programs, and the ClimateWise Business Network to help with energy conservation with businesses. And then in terms of getting out into the community, so typically we would have a booth at the EnviroFest if that was happening outdoors. We would have our displays, our games. We've had a successful bike valet program, which is a great example of a partnership with the local Blue Dot group. School and classroom visits, community meetings, print and online or social media. And there's I believe a Twitter post, which is showing our community gardens, and our community gardens are another way that the community can get involved. So that's a pretty quick run through of some of the programs in Richmond Hill. Again, really want to thank people who have been involved to date and who continue to be involved in making these programs successful. Hopefully that provides a bit of a context as to what we're trying to protect in Richmond Hill, some of the challenges there, as well as some of the opportunities and how we framed those. So I'm going to pass it over to Krista now to delve a little deeper into some specific programs, but I will be around for the Q&A as well. So I'll hand it to you, Krista.
All right, thanks, Miles. I'm just going to share my screen. Give me one moment. Okay, can we see that? Anybody?
We can, Krista, yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so thanks, Miles, for the beginning of that presentation. So I'll be talking a bit more on some of the more land and natural space aspects of the environment strategy. So to start, some of the main objectives that we do is to naturalize spaces and increase biodiversity in Richmond Hill. And we also meet and maintain canopy cover targets. So our programs that we do in the city, they can be divided into different categories. So we tend to some of the land that's on more, that's city owned, and then also on more private land. So this could include residential areas as well. Our programs also differ based on community focused programs. So this is involves the work or the help from volunteers and residents and even corporate groups and volunteer groups, as well as city led. So these are programs that we do in-house on our own. And also community focus would also include partnerships as well. Today, I'll focus on community stewardship program and pollinator initiatives, but I like to point out these are not the only programs that we offer through the city. So the first thing that I'll be talking about today is a community stewardship program. We also call it CSP for short. This program aims to restore city-owned lands in parks and open spaces through the involvement of the public, and then it involves both in-house work and our partnerships, as I mentioned before in the previous slide. So last year, we celebrated our 20th anniversary, and we created a little 50-second video just to kind of highlight some of the accomplishments and successes that we've had. I'll just share it right now. Oh, let me share my sound as well so you can hear it.
Every year, with the help of partner agencies, we work together with community volunteers to plant trees, clean up streams, and remove invasive plants in our parks and natural areas. In the last 20 years, thanks to 18,000 volunteers, we've planted 206,000 trees and shrubs, restored 84 acres of land, and 22 kilometers of stream. Together, we're making a difference for tomorrow. Thank you to all of our current and former partners for your dedication and support. For more information about upcoming planting and stewardship events, visit richmondhill.ca/tree planting.
Okay, so just to dive a little bit deeper into the program. So the work that we do can be either field-based work, so stuff that we do on ground with the community and their partnerships, and then the other would be education and outreach. So with field-based work, we do a lot of planting events, and this could be through our partnerships such as Leaf, Ontario Streams, Evergreen in the past, and TRCA, as mentioned by Miles in his slides. We also have invasive species management, so this could simply even mean pulling or snipping of any invasive species, or even applying herbicide in certain areas. As you can see in the middle right picture there, that's one of our volunteers pulling dog strangling vine. We also do stream restoration. This is to help reduce flooding downstream. As mentioned by Miles, climate change offers a few challenges such as flooding. So this is an effort to try to reduce flooding downstream. And it also is to create habitat for fish and wildlife. And then finally, we have monitoring and follow-up stewardship. And the unique aspect of this part of the program is that rather than just kind of doing the work that we do and kind of leaving it be, we make sure that we go back to see how well it's doing, if we need to do future work such as mulching, weeding, or even replanting an area. And this just ensures that we have a more successful restoration project completed. So on the other hand, we also have in-person workshops and then online webinars, and we also have information booths and displays at different city-led events. I thought to highlight our Mill Pond Splash plantings, since many of you who are on this call might have actually contributed to this in the past. So Mill Pond Splash was a TRCA event that occurred every June, I would say, for the past few years in Mill Pond Park. We've always helped, whether it's through informational walks or invasive species pullings, but since 2017, we started planting Rumble Pond Park slowly in sections. So that's for the past 3 years, except for this year. And we planted so far 350 trees, shrubs, and perennial wildflowers. So with the help of you guys or any other residents and volunteer groups, we've been making a difference here. So I thought to show you exactly how we like to approach these sort of restoration areas, because obviously it can be very hard to do everything at once, and it's easier to maintain and monitor and follow up by doing it in sections. So first year we did this was in 2017. We had a pretty sizable area with 485 square meters. We have planted 50 milkweed plants, 15 shrubs, and 50 shrubs, and trees and 50 shrubs. And we did this with over 20 volunteers. So jumping to 2018, we shrunk the size down a little bit. The previous area had a lot of pre-existing trees and shrubs, but this area was a lot open, as you can see in the bottom left corner there. And we planted approximately the same trees and shrubs and wildflowers. And we had over 70 volunteers, which was really great to see. We got the work done in no time, but it was really great to have everyone out. And then finally last year, since Mill Pond Splash was canceled, we still wanted to continue the restoration work that we were doing there. So we partnered with a volunteer community group, and we restored that blue polygon section right over there. All right, so moving on to pollinator initiatives. This is a little bit closer to home for me since I do take care of a lot of the programs for the city. So we have been doing quite a bit of work for the past few years, but I think that the important year that kind of started the foundation of a lot of our pollinator programming would be in 2016 when we took the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. And this kind of creates a lot of the foundation, and a lot of action items for the things that we do here that's pollinator related in the city. Prior to that, we did provide butterfly milkweed seeds to the Richmond Hill Seed Library. In 2017, we started to integrate milkweed plants into community planting plans, as well as other more development, like bigger woodlot restoration plans as well. And in 2018, we partnered with David Suzuki Foundation for their Butterfly Way project, which basically provides a habitat or landing pad for butterflies as they migrate from the south. Obviously, they get really tired when they come up here, so it provides more little habitat patches for them to lay their eggs. We were also declared a bee city in 2018, which is great. I know that the next speaker talks about a lot of native bees, so it's great to see that. And then we also launched the Harmony Pollinator Garden, which is located just behind Mill Pond Gallery, so across the street from Mill Pond Park. And this is run and operated by one of our community garden groups. So moving on to 2019, this is a pretty big year for us, I would say. We started the Pollinator Working Group, which involves different individuals from different departments coming together a couple times a year to discuss some of the successes and accomplishments that we've achieved, as well as looking for areas of improvement or gaps or opportunities to be able to do more pollinator work. It also helps us look back over the year to see what action items we've fulfilled from our Mayor's Monarch Pledge and also our Bee City Declaration. Last year, as part of EnviroFest, we did do a canoe planting, which is the next slide. I'll just talk about it a little bit more. And then we also updated our grass and weeds bylaw, which allows for pollinator gardens to be planted on private properties, so in residential yards. And we also launched our pollinator webpage, which is a great hub to see what we do here in Richmond Hill. And I'll have a link on the last slide, so if anybody wants to check that out after, that'd be great. So this year was a bit challenging, it was very different given current circumstances. So we didn't get to do as much as we would have liked, but we did partner with the TRCA for Flight of the Monarch, and there was a 200 free plant kit giveaway through the city, which was really great. Each plant kit had at least 10 flowers, so that's quite a bit if you do the math. And then other highlights that I'd like to point out are our proclamations for Pollinator Week, which happen every June, usually the third week of June. We also distribute wildflower kits to the Healthy Yards program, and then we also provide in-person and online pollinator-oriented workshops and webinars. So I just wanted to highlight the 2019 EnviroFest canoe planting, just because some people who are listening in might have actually participated last year. So it'd be kind of great to see kind of the work that you've done highlighted. So we partnered with the David Suzuki Foundation. We actually had somebody come out to help us with the planting. We planted 60 wildflowers in one canoe. There was 8 different species. It was planted by residents and city staff, and it is now maintained by Richmond Hill Horticultural Society. If anyone is curious to know where this is located, it's located just south of Mill Pond Park parking lot. So Mill Street and Trench, just right behind that parking lot there. And it's kind of mixed in with the other gardens located as well. So moving forward, our next steps, we're not done yet. Next year, we are looking to install a pollinator garden at the Forest Collective Garden. That's located at the back of Phyllis Rollinson Park, and it's maintained by one of our community garden groups as well. We also have 2 more canoes to plant. So we're going to be planning to see where we could do these and who we can partner with. And then we're also exploring other partnerships and opportunities. For a few slides here at the bottom, I've showed a few logos. These highlight either partnerships that we've had or some of the programs that we offer through the city that support these programs. All right, so just tying it all together. So through the work that we do with the city, we would not be able to do a lot of the work without you guys and even our partnerships. When working with the environment, it's a collective effort for sure. Whether it's on city land through a community stewardship program or even on private land, like in people's own backyards, you know, planting native plants through healthy yards or even coming together in community garden programs. All right, so that's basically it. I provided some links here, also links to some of Miles's slides, and then some things that I talked about as well. That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krista, and thanks, Miles. I feel a little bit like I'm drinking from a fire hose at this point with all this information, so thank you very, very much for your input. We do have a couple of questions. I will say, you know, I'm not supposed to play favorites, and I have lots of policies that we have in Richmond Hill and that I have to read and refer to in my life, but I will share a secret with everybody that's listening. Greening the Hill is my favorite policy document. So that's what my life has come to. I have a favorite policy document. Anyway, I thank you for all of that. I mean, I do appreciate, Krista, the Flight of the Monarch Day, which was a great success this year, and I thank you for that. I know for my part, we had a whole bunch of people participating in tagging monarchs, and we actually submitted our goal, which was 100 tagged monarch pieces of data to Monarch Watch, which so hopefully some of those Richmond Hill born monarchs are now sunning themselves in El Rosario, Mexico. And, if Monarch Watch does find them, they will contact us and let us know that they made it safely there. So our best to them. A couple of questions that have come in. There was a question, I think probably this is to you, Miles. Actually, it's probably a 2-part question. One part is where are the seedlings sourced from, and are they Canadian grown? And the other question is, I think, Miles, you had mentioned about the tree canopy has increased. Do you know how much it has increased in over the years? I know we were told that in council, and I can't remember the number.
I do. Yeah, and I mean, I'll also ask if Krista wants to answer any of this as well, because it's probably group than mine. But I can just briefly say I know the increase was from around 24 point something to around 29, so it was roughly a 5% increase, and I think that's over about a 5-year span as well, 5 or 6.
Yeah, that was from 2010 to 2016, so it was about 5 years.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Krista.
Oh no, I just thought I would just jump in to kind of help answer that question. So the growth did happen. I think it's asking how it happened. So it did happen in both public and private land. So back in 2010, when aerial imagery was conducted, a lot of the new development trees were a lot smaller. But as 6 years goes by, a lot of the tree canopies did grow. So it did show in our aerial imagery to show that increase in the canopy cover percentage.
Thank you, Krista. That's actually, I guess that's that statistic is overlain on top of the challenge that we've had and all municipalities in Ontario have had with the devastation of the emerald ash borer. And I know we've got to move on here quickly, but I think that's important because, you know, the emerald ash borer has killed thousands of trees in Richmond Hill. And I know when I first started on council, I mean, we had the ice storm, which took down a lot of trees, particularly ash. And then, you know, the emerald ash borer, which was already weakened, or weakening our urban canopy, has since finished them off. So, I mean, there's a lot of ash trees now that are gone. And I think that that's even you know, gives us a greater opportunity to reforest. And I did appreciate at the beginning, it was an interesting slide about the diversity of our urban forest and how incredibly important that is, because I mean, frankly, had we thought back 50 years ago when we were planting ash trees on all of our roads in Ontario, not just Richmond Hill, and not thinking of the threat that, you know, the off chance an invasive species might have on that tree canopy, we probably would have had a more diverse street tree canopy. So I think that's really important. Anyway, I want to thank you to both very much for providing that information. It really is an overwhelming amount of information, and you know, we can still do better, and we will. But it's good to know that we are doing the things that we're doing and moving forward. So thanks very much, Krista, and thanks very much, Miles.
My pleasure.
We really appreciate your participation.
Thank
So
you.
I now have the pleasure of introducing our last speaker, which is Scott MacGyver. And Scott will be speaking on wild bees in our home gardens and parks. It has been a while ago that Richmond Hill Council passed a motion that I introduced to certify Richmond Hill as a bee city. And it has become a lot more evident to a lot of people, including myself, that bees and other pollinating insects are really important to the ecosystem. And I think that may have come partly because I think generally we're understanding the importance of bees and pollinators, but I would hope that the Bee City Pledge that we and other municipalities have taken would also help to raise the public awareness. But bees and pollinators are all obviously very important to us, given that they pollinate a great deal of the food that we need to survive. So it made perfect sense for us when we were looking for speakers for this event to invite somebody like Scott, who's an expert on this topic. And I'm thrilled and honored that he accepted our invitation to speak. So Scott is a community ecologist and assistant professor at the University of Toronto, Scarborough. He is interested in plants and pollinators, especially bees, in cities, and more broadly, biodiversity, conservation, and ecosystem service delivery of urban green spaces. So this includes public and private gardens, parks, and green roofs. He works with a number of NGOs and municipalities to implement community science, planning and policy, and all of that supports wildlife, and also works with researchers to better understand urban ecological systems from a multi-city and global perspective. So to learn more about Scott and his work, you can also visit, there's a link on my website on the events page to his website. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to you, Scott, and if you can share your screen at this time, that would be great. I think you may still be muted.
There we go.
Too,
there we go. Yes, that's right. No. I figured that out. You'd think I'd have this figured out by now. I'm on Zoom almost all the time, teaching on Zoom, and let me just pull this screen up as well. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. Hope everyone can see the slide there. There's a bit of an animation of some of the bees that our research lab focuses on. These are cavity nesting bees. They nest in what you see here. This is a bee hotel. Different females occupying different nesting tubes, and that's because all of these bees are solitary. Every female is her own queen. She makes her own nests, lays her own eggs, gathers her own food. And this is in contrast to what a lot of people think of when they think of bees: honeybees working together, a queen managing a colony of workers. Honeybees, of course, are just one small group of the many, many different kinds of bees we find around the world, over 20,000 described species. And what I'd like to talk a little bit about today, not getting too deeply in some of the research that we do in Toronto, but thinking a bit more generally about the kinds of bees we find in cities and what we as individuals can do to help them. And I'll just preface that by saying, of course, we're dealing with the pandemic and a great deal of eco-anxiety that stems from climate change and other large factors that seemingly feel larger than life, larger than what an individual can do. But I like to argue in my classes and in my teaching and in the work that we do that us as individuals, as homeowners, as community can actually have quite a substantial impact on local bee diversity, abundance, and of course, all the fruits that come with that labor, right? So pollination services, which are of course very important in cities with great growth in urban agriculture, food security needs, as well as culturally appropriate food security needs, which is particularly important for us in Toronto and the surrounding region. Okay, so I'm at the University of Toronto Scarborough, and please follow up with me later if you have further questions. I know we're on a very short timeline here. So these are just a few of the kinds of bees that we study in our lab using those bee hotels and a variety of other techniques that I won't get too into today. But you can see that the shape and size and color vary quite substantially. Again, much more diverse than one thinks of honeybees. Many of the small little wasp-looking, ant-looking, beetle-looking things we find on flowers, I mean, sometimes they're bees. And this is what a bee often looks like as it dives in and out of a flower. It's covered in pollen. And bees are the most effective and diverse terrestrial pollinators around the world. One of the reasons is because of the co-evolved relationships that bees have with flowers. Flowers attract bees by producing nectar, easily available pollen and nectar guides, and so on. And bees have evolved what are almost like Christmas trees all over their bodies. They have hairs on hairs, and this great increase in surface area allows them to collect more pollen than one would expect, moving it to certain areas on their body, bringing it back to their nest, and consuming that, providing that for their immatures. You can see here too on the panel that there's a lot of different colors, shapes, sizes, times of year, heights from the ground, and so forth of flowers. And the beauty and diversity that we see in flowers when we step outside our door, looking on our balcony, we can thank co-evolved mutualisms with insect pollinators for that diversity, because again, the colors and smells and shapes and sizes and so on have evolved to attract specific pollinating insects. And this is what it looks in a more abstract way. So think of all the green circles as bees and all the orange squares as flowers. This interconnectedness is what we study in our research lab. So think of this as a plant pollinator network where different flower species and patches support different amounts and types of bees. And when certain areas are lost through development or certain flower species disappear because of extinction and other factors, we lose this connectedness in this network, and that can lead to cascades and loss. And so we're really interested in stability in this relationship, and that comes with planning and thinking about diversity in our decision making. Again, we know that bees are important pollinators, and that provides us with much of the fresh and nutritious and healthy foods that we enjoy. Just a pixelated image, I realize now, but showing fruit on our plate and jam on our toast, various nuts and seeds and raisins and so on in a bowl there, juice, even milk in our coffee. Much of the fodder that's fed to cattle in Ontario is alfalfa, which is 100% pollinator requiring crop. So much of the things that we appreciate, even at breakfast time, we can thank a bee for. And this, again, as I mentioned, with respect to urban agriculture, is very, very much important in cities. This is Toronto here, one of the largest in terms of population city in North and Central America, yet we're also one of the greenest. So New York, 14, 17%, San Francisco, similar. Toronto's up near 30% green space when you factor in the Rouge, Tommy Thompson, and all of our ravines. And in this area, and many of the same species we have in Toronto we'll also have in Richmond Hill, we've created a checklist of over 350 species of wild bee in this region. And much of that we can appreciate is due to the fact that these ravines have remained intact through a great deal of development and anthropogenic change, much of which has been shown around the world to have negative impacts on bees. So some cities seemingly are a refuge for bee diversity, and this particular region, in part because of the kind of environmental history of this region, but also in some of the ways that we've done landscape planning. And in Toronto, we've really focused on bees and their needs, both from a bottom-up approach, so community involvement, but also from a top-down. So I really appreciate this opportunity to speak in this group now, because that kind of really reflects some of the things that we've been doing in Toronto. In 2016, we created the Bees of Toronto book. This is a free book you can get at the libraries, a hard copy. You can also download it for free online at the City of Toronto website. And in it, again, much information that's very relevant for those of you in Richmond Hill, a checklist of all the bees of the region, the history of bee research and honeybee keeping in the region, artists who use bees in their work, a variety of other important information that is pertinent to Richmond Hill. And 2 years ago, we created the Toronto Pollinator Protection Strategy. And this is a strategy that was undertaken by the city and passed unanimously by City Council in May 2019 now. And in it is a number of priorities which focus on the needs of wild and native bees. Other cities have taken these steps and put urban beekeeping, honey beekeeping at the forefront. And increasingly, we're learning that that can have a negative impact on native wild bees in our region. And lastly, this past year, we created a program, Pollinate TO, and this is a program meant to reach out to community groups and offer them $5,000 grants in order for them to create pollinator gardens on public or private spaces. And last year, 37 different groups were awarded this amount. And this is going to be an annual occurrence. And our research lab and others are working with the city to create opportunities to monitor the success and increase adaptive management of these programs moving forward. So why do we do this? I'll go through this fairly quickly, but to say that bees, of course, are threatened pollinators. We've heard a lot about bees disappearing, and there's a whole multitude of reasons, and often these are acting in synergy around the world, from climate change to pesticide use to landscape change through paving and through agriculture. All of these factors influence bees, both in terms of the food they collect, the pollen and nectar from flowers, and also where they nest, which will be in the second half of this talk. All this graph is really showing is that as the slope of the line decreases, you can see that's happening through time. So blue and green are in 2009 and 2010. And previous years, 50 and 100 years in the past, in black and red. What this shows is that when we study bees in this particular landscape, which is found just outside of Chicago, over a 100-year period, we see a decline in the number of different kinds of bees we collect when we control for abundance. And this is happening around the world right now, is that when we go out and we survey 40 bees in our net, we're finding half the number of species that we once did. In Toronto and region, this is happening as well. And so this is an example of the rusty patch bumblebee, a species that has been extirpated from our region, still found in the US, but this was once the fourth most common bumblebee, and it's disappeared. Why is that? One argument is pesticides. Another is an increase in viruses and pathogens from the increasing use of domesticated honeybees and bumblebees in agriculture. And the next one we're focusing in on is the yellow banded bumblebee, which is showing severe declines as well. And again, an important point here, and one that we've learned is having a negative impact on a number of wild bees, are the keeping of honeybees as a hobby in natural areas, in urban, on rooftops. Honeybees, of course, are social, and they collect a large amount of food from the landscape, so they present a huge competition factor for a number of wild native bee species. And a recent study in Utah showed that a colony of honeybees can consume the equivalent of the needs of 100,000 native wild bees per year. So you can imagine, by keeping just a few hives under the auspice of saving the bees, the plan to save the bees, we may actually be inadvertently having a negative impact. So these are really important research topics for us in Toronto and other cities around the world. And again, we still need honeybees. They're still very, very important. This is an almond orchard. We all have our almond milk in the morning. And in large scale, conventional kind of contemporary agricultural landscapes, honeybees are really important. But when it comes to the argument of helping saving the bees, honeybees don't really contribute to that because we can just go on the internet and buy more, whereas we can't do that with our native wild bee species. So what do we have in Toronto and the surrounding regions? Interestingly, there's 7 families of bees known around the entire world. And we have 6 of them here. So again, a very diverse region. We have honeybees, bumblebees, and carpenter bees. That's these 3 images here that represent the Apidae. So honeybees, you're familiar with at the top. Bumblebees and carpenter bees, some people often mistake those two. Carpenter bees are shiny on their abdomen and they can pivot and hover, whereas bumblebees bumble. They kind of flit around. We have Halictidae. These are the sweat bees. That one on the top is called Agapestemon virescens, and this is Toronto's official bee, passed by City Council as well in that same Toronto Pollinator Protection Strategy moment. Many of these bees are very small, so you know, 1/2 centimeter, black or blue, very hard to find, but ever present. Some of them can even nest in a 5-centimeter flower pot on a balcony. So very ubiquitous urban bee group. I will say also, we even found, not us, but a colleague of ours found a brand new species of bee to science in downtown Toronto, and it was found in this group, right around College of Bathurst, actually. We also have andrenids and caletids. Many of these are ground nesting bees. They nest in dig holes in sandy, open, non-compacted, loamy, well-draining soils. So when cities and you know, planners can find those areas, we often try to ensure that they leave them alone, don't build over them or sod lawn them. Leafcutter bees and mason bees, wool carder bees, these are bees that have really dense hairs underneath their abdomen. You can see that on the top image. A very distinguishing characteristic that you can tell your friends, you know, in a social distancing barbecue in your backyard. You can easily point to a leafcutter bee because it has these branched hair or these hairs under its abdomen. These are the kinds of bees that nest in cavities, like those bee hotels that we do a lot of research on. And we actually just found a new species to our region this past year. Turns out, though, it is an invasive species that's moving its way up from the south in the States, originally from Japan, displacing mason bee communities. So we're focusing on that. The last group down here is Melitidae. These are the oil collecting bees. So Lysomachia is a favorite flower of this particular bee because it produces floral oils, which are very nutritious, but only certain kinds of bees can use them. We have 1 species here. Okay, so what can we do as individuals? Well, there's 3 main things we want to keep in mind. The first is forage, so what bees feed on. I'm not going to go too deeply into this because there's a number of plant lists out there. We just heard some wonderful content about what Richmond Hill is doing, and links are there. I'm sure there's some plant lists. Many of them are quite suitable for this region. Nesting material and nesting locations is something I want to really focus on next. And lastly, nesting materials. So the kinds of materials certain bees need to actually fabricate the nests once they find a suitable location. You can see the redbud leaf here being cut and sap coming from a pine tree. These are actually resources for certain kinds of native bees in our region. So first thing is the ground is really important, and often we're not treating it correctly in order to conserve bees. You can see on this image here that bees many of them are architects, right? They dig down underground, some of them very shallow, some of them very deep, but they create these beautiful nests that can interweave between different species in the same hillside. Again, they often like loamy, sandy, you know, non-compacted soils. You can see some of these bees. In fact, Toronto's official bee is a ground nester as well, choosing kind of older lawns to nest in. But again, when we find these kind of patches of ground nesting bees, they will often nest in aggregations, some of them, because they are for lack of these like really crucial and useful soil types. And this is a big focus of our research right now, is determining what are the soil preferences of many of Toronto's native bee species. But you can see here, everyone's standing around. There's nothing to be fearful of, right? Many of you may have encountered a bee and maybe you've been stung. And I don't doubt that if you have, it was either a yellow jacket or a hornet, social wasps, but it could also be social bees like honeybees or bumblebees. These groups, the workers, they're protective of their queen, of their honey stores, of their larvae, of their colony. And they have that innate defensive behavior, willing to sting themselves or put themselves in harm's way to defend. Whereas all the wild bee species, many hundreds of species in a region, many of them, although they may have a stinger, it may be too small to puncture human skin, or they don't want to go anywhere near us, because if you are your own queen and you make your own nest and lay your own eggs, as I mentioned at the beginning, you don't want to put yourself in harm's way. So solitary bees are very friendly, docile, and often don't bother us. So they're not really something to fear, even when we find a patch like this this is in High Park. The city has really taken ownership over this. And in the past, maybe 10, 15 years ago, if somebody found a patch of bees on a walk and called 311 and reported this, the city might send out an exterminator and actually till up that ground and sod lawn it. Now the city actually erects a sign and a little rope around the area, encouraging people to value the native pollinators in these regions. And it's actually led to people calling 311 and reporting that they learned something new about wild native bees in our city. So the second group are those above ground bees. So most nest in the ground, but some nest above it, right? They like drier, sunnier, open nests. Often all of them, again, are solitary. This is just a log where we can take a drill gun and a long drill bit and start drilling into that log in order to create those galleries that these bees seek to nest into. What they're looking for is beetle bored holes out of decaying logs. But in cities, this can be represented by a lot of our garden waste, nail holes in brick or in fence posts. And so these above ground nesting bees tend to do particularly well in cities. And these are the same ones that use bee hotels. You can see the kind of linear slice between a raspberry cane or an elderberry cane here. What these bees do is they lay their larvae in a linear sequence from back to front, all the females in the back, all the males in the front. And this is because males are less costly. They don't reproduce. They reproduce, but they don't build new nests. And so if a raccoon or a woodpecker attacks this nest, they'll often eat the males and the females will survive. So this is a strategy that's used by many of these different species. Again, we can build these kinds of bee hotels or structures that provide a nesting location for a lot of these bees. What we've learned in our research, though, is many of these support common species that aren't of conservation concern. So when we do have a bit of funding to do something about bees, we often suggest not buying something like this or fabricating it unless it's meant to be a piece of art or another educational experiential item. But if the goal is to conserve wild native bees, then some of the work you're doing with restoration and planting is the best strategy. And again, these above ground nesting bees, one of the reasons they do particularly well in cities is many of them have these, erroneous or aberrant or successful behaviors that allow them to adapt to this changed environment, right? We heard about the trees that were selected for the city of Richmond Hill, the ash trees. And if only we had known there would be an invasive species in the future that could affect these trees, right? Adaptation lags the environment, right? So I talk about this in class all the time, that the environment changes. We can't be pre-adapted to a future environment that's unknown. And so when we create an urban environment and bees are present there, sometimes they make these silly mistakes like nesting in a tire or in a metal armchair. But actually, maybe, there's something about doing this that makes them successful in this new changed environment. So the last thing is nesting materials, and we do a lot of work with DNA barcoding to determine the types of plants that different bees use in their nests. So we dissect the nests and we select the DNA sequence that will allow us to determine what species of leaf that is. And these leafcutter bees, there's about 26 species in the region. They collect all different kinds of plants. We can then map what species different leafcutter bees use. So when we're planting a pollinator garden and we want to have lots of flowers for bees, that's wonderful. But remember, nesting locations and nesting materials also matter. And if they're not present in the landscape, then the bees won't be there either, no matter how many flowers you plant. So this is just a long list, which I can share to anyone if interested, of some of the kinds of plants that leafcutter bees use to make their nests in Toronto. And so just to summarize that, forage, nest locations, nesting materials, these are the three items we want to be thinking about when installing and planning pollinator gardens and activities. So to summarize, of course, bees and flowers and us benefit from pollination. Pollination is improved with bee diversity. We didn't talk a lot about that, but if you have 10 different bees that visit a single flower, if each of those 10 are a different species versus all of them being the same species, there will be benefits that will accrue because of different pollination strategies. There's about 360 species of bee in our region. Many of them are generalists, few are specialists like that oil collecting bee, and some of them do particularly well in cities, which is really encouraging, but we need to be thinking about those that aren't doing as well. There's many things we can do, much to learn, and I'll just end very quickly on saying some of those things we can do, of course, is planting a diversity of native flowering plants. That includes trees, right? So many bees love flowering trees, so avoiding like the London plane trees and the ginkgos, and thinking a bit more about the oaks, maples, birches. Planting flowers, right? So horticultural varieties of roses. This creates a huge mess and difficult for bees to access some of the pollen and nectar. Native grown that retain a lot of those simple features. A nice prairie rose here, it's like a landing pad for a lot of bee species. Avoiding mowing as much as we can, right? Discouraging frequent mowing creates more patchy vegetation, not only the little flowers, the prunellas and the clovers and so forth that grow in the grass, but also the different plant strategies that create taproots and so forth in the ground, inevitably create ways in which bees can nest in those lawns. And also no mulch. We've also learned that by mulching the ground, we can bury ground nesting bee nests and they can't get out of the nest. So leaf mulch or straw mulch that's well shredded is much, much more preferred than any kind of bark mulch. Cutting stems, preparing things before winter, leave the stems long in the ground. As you see here in the image, those stems will die back, the pith will decompose, and bees can then nest in that in the previous year. Similarly, don't throw everything out on the side of the road for pickup. If you have a back shed or something, a place where you can just pile a bunch of these branches, I definitely encourage that. There may be bees in there, or there may be bees in there in the future. Rocks and exposed brick and exposed soil is really important. Bees are like fish or frogs. Their metabolism, their ability to get energy and go out and pollinate is dependent on the temperature of the external environment. So you often see bees sunning out on rocks or on stones, especially southeast facing rocks and stones. That's different than birds or humans, where we get our energy from what we eat to metabolize. And lastly, of course, is to talk to your neighbors. So these kinds of resources are out there. I encourage you to check them out and follow up with me if you can't find them. But one of the best things we can do is when we are ourselves, create a pollinator garden, we're encouraging others to take a look at it, learn a bit more about it. They take those resources home with them and pass it on, right? So talking to your neighbors about this stuff is really critical. And I'll end there and just say, please there's my email and my Twitter if you have any questions. I'm not sure if I went over time, but thanks so much for having me, everyone.
No, Scott, you're perfectly on time. So thank you very much. I'm listening to you, and I mean, unfortunately, it's been a long time since I was in university, but I really enjoyed courses like this, and I think I probably would have really enjoyed you as a teacher. So thank you for your passion, and thank you for the information that you have given me. This is more drinking from a fire hose, I think. We actually do have some questions, if we could.
Yeah.
I think before I tell, I would comment that there's been a number of things that have been said by you and all the other presenters too about interconnectedness, and I mean, we saw several slides in your presentation about like graphic representations of webs that were incredibly interconnected, and I think that it's really interesting how I think our overall viewpoint of the environment has to be looked at in a broader perspective, but also in the fact that we are all connected. We're connected as humans, but we're connected to the environment, and the environment is just unbelievably connected to each other.
That's right. Yeah, we often say in class, like, community ecology, it's like when you pull a string, you realize it's connected to everything else. It's very much like that with the environment. That's right.
Well, that's probably something I wish humanity had learned a number of decades ago, because I mean, a lot of the actions that we took, I mean, in fairness, we probably weren't fully cognizant of an action here creates a reaction there, and that wasn't the reaction that we thought was going to happen. So I think that's probably an important point that's come out of this, your presentation for sure, and the others as well.
Right. Well, and again, to that point that you just said, humans are part of nature as well, right? So we benefit and appreciate greatly from it, and we're connected to it as well. Yeah.
No, for sure. So we have a couple of questions here.
Please.
Sally is asking, can you go over your comment on us making bee houses? Is it beneficial to the bees we want? I must admit, I was thinking about that too.
Yeah, sure.
Good point.
So, I mean, absolutely, we use them in our research. They tell us a lot about the bees in our environment. There are certain methods that one can employ to make them more effective than others, and I can go over those really quickly too. Avoiding non-permeable materials like plastics. You want to avoid that because, of course, inside these things, bees are breathing and alive. So paper, cardboard, plant material. One of the most effective materials one can use to make bee hotels is the plant, some of you will know, it's called the common reed, Phragmites australis. It's a very invasive plant species all around, go down the 401, all along the roadsides, that really tall grass blowing in the wind. You can cut those and they're like bamboo. They have a natural node inside. So you want to have nesting tubes or drill holes that are 15 to 18 centimeters in length and between 3 and 10 millimeters in width. And that will provide the habitat for the majority of the kinds of bees we see here. But again, the kinds of bees that will nest in bee hotels like those, they're those that have a lot of flexibility in their nesting preferences, right? So we're not really per se helping some of the more specialized bees. But I mean, this is research in progress. We've been using bee hotels in Toronto since 2011, and we've found 86 species of bees, wasps, and parasites. We've found new invasive species to the region that we're using these to monitor bees. So again, I won't go too deeply into it, but the point is if a community group or an organization is looking to fund or support native bee habitat or interventions to support them, I would just down prioritize bee hotels over restoring plantings, restoring soils. As I mentioned, we put a bee hotel up, 75% of our bees can't even use it. And I mean, a bunch of those cavity nesting bees won't use it either. So, but a really fun activity, especially with kids.
Thank you. Another question that we had was, and I think this is probably a fairly large question, but it's Scott, you mentioned diversity of plants. Is it critical to have flowers that bloom at different times of the year?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've all just gone through fall. I mean, it's really cold now, but the goldenrods, the asters, and all of these fall flowers, most of the bees are out in the middle of the summer, but even later in the year, there's going to be some species that benefit greatly or exploit or specialize on those fall flowers. We heard about the monarch butterflies, of course, too. Many other kinds of pollinating insects depend on flowers at different times. So yes, when we think about diversity, we're thinking about diversity in type, we're thinking about diversity in space and time, right? So if we as city planners have an opportunity to create pollinator habitat, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket in one spot. Maybe thinking a bit more about the connectedness of those patches to benefit more different areas and different species. So diversity in species, diversity in time, so throughout the year, is really important. I think a lot of pollinator gardens strategies and guidelines always suggest having at least 2 different species in flower at all times.
Right. And I think I don't profess to know a whole lot about gardening, although I am learning quite a bit actually over the last few years. And one of the things that I have seen in a lot lately coming from gardeners that actually know what they're talking about is the move to more native types of species. And I found it very interesting, your comment about roses. I mean, they're lovely. But they're not actually, this is kind of counterintuitive, but they're not actually all that great for bees because they're just too hard to get at the good stuff if you're a bee, right?
Yeah, some of the highly ornamented ones, like that are, artificially selected by people to be overly petiolated. But even, non-native flowering plants, the garden types of plants, etc., they can still support some kinds of bees. It's just there's a lot that will be excluded from using those kinds of resources. And by using too many, we may be altering the community composition of bees in Richmond Hill, let's say. We use way more native plant or non-native plants. We allow invasive species to proliferate. These are resources for bees, they're flowers, but there's going to be certain bees that are going to benefit from them, and year over year, their numbers are going to increase, and then they will have a competitive edge over native or specialist bee species. So there's quite a lot of dynamics and detail and messiness in ecology and interactions. And I think the best thing we can do is be adaptive and learn from information as it becomes available to us. Yeah.
One of the things, I think that's an interesting transition, and I think we are seeing this in Richmond Hill, and I can see this in my role as a counselor, is that I think, the environmentalist in me looks at an entirely natural ecosystem and say, that's complex, it's lovely, there's many different species here, it does the environment good because there's just so much variety, and that's what Mother Nature likes. Then we go into a more urban environment, and particularly in the past, and maybe less so today, we're starting to see gardens that maybe aren't as manicured, but they're probably a lot more diverse and welcoming to many species, including bees. And I think, as a society, I hope we can get our heads around that to say, there's a broader definition, let's say, of beauty. And it's not to say that we can't have a green lawn, but perhaps we have less of it, or perhaps we have other species within the lawn itself.
Right. And I mean, what that boils down to too is trade-offs, right? So all of these different urban green space interventions and plans, they have ecosystem services and they have ecosystem disservices, right? So we have to balance these things and in our planning. So it's often not a one size fits all solution, right? It's very much it can even be, neighborhood dependent. I think, there's challenges, especially at a level like you're at, in making those kinds of decisions. But, based on what I've just seen with respect to some of the previous talks, it sounds like there's a lot of positive things happening in Richmond Hill. And, I'll say one last thing here is that many of the things that we do for environmental restoration, we have target species and target groups, and we have non-target groups, right? And what that means is that if we plant a pollinator garden for bees or for monarch butterflies, there's going to be a multitude of other animals that will benefit from that as well. Beetles and flies and dragonflies and birds and things that eat those things. And so again, everything's connected, like we said earlier. Yeah.
And none of those critters are yucky.
Well, I mean, we live in an urban environment, right? So we have to, again, trade-offs.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Scott. Your passion and your knowledge is amazing, and you've been a great addition to our seminar today. So thank you very much. I'm sure everybody is going home with a lot more information that they had to come in with it. So anyway, at this point in time, we're almost out of time, but I would like to take the opportunity again to thank all of our speakers. John Jersey from Miller Waste and Miller Compost, great presentation, thank you. Some very practical advice on that. Krista Lynn and Miles, again, thank you for all you do in the city, but also for your presentation specifically today. I'm on council, and I am quite interested in the environment, and listening to a presentation like that, I forget all of the things that we're doing and also all the opportunities that we can do in the future. So thank you for helping everybody on the webinar today to understand that. And again, Scott, thank you very much. This is a very important thing that you're talking about. And you know, I am very proud that Richmond Hill has taken the Bee City Pledge and the Mayor's Monarch Pledge, which actually are quite similar in a lot of ways. And I think since those two things have happened, I know as a councillor, I have watched improvements that have been made in my community, and I'm very proud of that. And I thank you for bringing some more knowledge to our community. So anyway, I do want to thank our sponsors again as well, Healthy Planet and Miller Waste and Miller Compost. Without your support, we can't put on an event like this, and I really do appreciate that. I can tell by your mandates as companies, the passion that you also share for the environment, and you certainly are you know, partners in our community in many different ways. I would also like to thank Andrew and Kate and Susan and Alana for helping to organize this event on many, many different levels. It was definitely a learning curve for us as the pandemic kind of threw a wrench into so many different plans this year, but I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope everybody has benefited from this event and the learning that we've put into putting it on for you. I would also like to thank many community organizations that have been such great partners in working towards a better environment here in Richmond Hill. And a number of those are fairly new, actually. But a lot of those organizations and more information about each one of them can be found on my website and on the events page. So I hope that you'll take the time to look at that. If you're interested in being an active part of some of these programs and joining an environmental group or so on, I know that Krista Lynn and Miles O'Brien did talk about some of the opportunities that the city has for tree planting and different things like that. But I also would encourage you to take a look at some of these organizations links, because there are probably opportunities within those organizations as well for people. So I think you know, we've got a good foundation for environmental knowledge from all these speakers today, and I hope that there are some pieces of information that people can take away and put into action and help to make our corner of the world a little better than it was before. There's no question in my mind that the pandemic has forced a stronger spotlight, I think, on the importance of the environment to citizens of Richmond Hill in their everyday lives. It's been my observation that, for example, the demand for parks and open spaces in Richmond Hill has exploded since March. And I think anybody that's gone out to a park and open space has seen people wanting to get out in nature and get the exercise and the fresh air and probably the resulting boost to their mental health that the environment gives us all. This is a good thing, and I hope that that will stick around after the pandemic is over. I really do believe we need to have as much park and open space in Richmond Hill as we can, because I hope the demand will go through the roof and we will need more. I'll just end off by saying, you know, I have a quote that is hanging over my desk that I found a number of years ago. It's from an African environmentalist named Baba Duyum, and it says, "For in the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught." And I hope today's seminar has taught everybody something that you didn't already know. And I know it did for me, and I hope it moved you to love and care for your natural world with even more passion than you had before. I wish everyone a really great day, and I thank you again for taking the time to attend today. At this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Andrew for some closing remarks and some housekeeping items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and thanks again, everybody, for a great presentation. And thank you so much for attending and for those great questions. I do want to point out, if you haven't already done so, like I mentioned at the top of the webinar, please visit Councillor Russ's website for the Partner Resource Center and participate in our fun trivia challenge. And as you're exiting, there is a short post-event webinar survey that we just asked if you take a minute or so just to conduct it. It'll help us plan these webinars for the future and help us improve down the road. So thank you, everybody, for attending. And as Councillor Ross mentioned, enjoy the rest of the afternoon and take care, everybody. Thank you so much.